Morning brewers, it's Saturday morning, brew day. I'm mashed in. Grainfather's happily mashing away there, so I thought I'd do a quick check-in on one or two bits and pieces. But, I've got 23 minutes to go before the mash out. That should be enough time. So what have I been up to? I've been using the hop rocket. I've got some really hoppy brews from it. The real question is it hoppier than doing a hop stand to justify the cost? And to be honest, to answer that question, I'm going to have to do a split brew, aren't I? So that's one mash, split it, half of it through the hop rocket, half of it with the hop stand. So I'm going to do that soon. I'll make a video and do some triangle tests, bottle it all separately, do some blind triangle tests, see if anybody can tell the difference of the two. So that's going okay. Yeast harvesting still going okay. I'll be using the White Labs English Ale yeast in this brew. This will be the 5th brew, I think, that I've used on the same yeast, and that's really vigorous and still going well, so that's good and helping manage the cost of the yeast. One thing I have discovered since the last video is some podcasts that I like. So I've been listening to a couple. Basic Brewing I quite like. I don't listen to it every single week, but I pick out the episodes that look interesting. But my favourite one's Experimental Brewing, and I do listen to each one of those. I like the question and answers, but I also like the listeners' tips. And one listener's tip that I liked was get yourself a toolbox to put all the bits and pieces in that you use on brew day. Keep them all gathered together. So I like that idea. Got a toolbox, so I thought it might be amusing to look through it, and I'll show you what I've got in my toolbox. Maybe you can tell me what you have in yours, any tips or little gadgets that you've got that make brewing a bit easier. So let's have a look. What's in my toolbox? Right, first thing I've got in here is a couple of electronic thermometers. So these are really cheap from eBay, but they're also can be a little bit flaky and unreliable. I mean, they're only £2 or £3 or something, but they're really handy for just dipping in and testing the temperature of things. In anticipation of that conking out, I've got a slightly better one here, which is just a bit more robust. That's ready to go should that one conk out. Got some pH strips. I'm wondering, is it worth getting pH meter? I'm not sure. They're quite expensive. They look like they take a lot of maintenance. If anybody's got any experience of pH meters and whether they're worth having, I'd be interested in hearing about it. Got my hydrometer, of course. I do wonder how accurate these domestic hydrometers are. Professional ones seem really hard to get. Got my refractometer. I've only recently got this, and I've got it partly. I only use it hot side, so I don't use it when there's alcohol in the wort, because then you've got to faff about with a correction factor, and you may as well use a hydrometer, I think. I got it because I've been working on consistency. Now, how commercial brewers are very careful about consistency. They have to produce the same beer over and over again. We tend to play around with different recipes all the time, but I think there's a good discipline in consistency and being able to brew the same beer reliably. So to do that, I like to be able to check how my specific gravity is going after the mash, how much boil off I'll have to do to get to the right specific gravity, and of course refractometer allows you to do that really easily without having to wait for, well, you only take a tiny drop, so whilst I think you should wait for it to cool down a bit, it's a lot quicker than taking 100ml off or something and waiting for it to cool enough for your hydrometer, and then it's too late. And then the little bits and pieces that need to go with it in here, so that's my distilled water for calibrating it, the little dropper you get with it, and the little cloth. All that's in there as well. Got a little screwdriver. I use that for adjusting the manifold on my kegerator upstairs. Ordinary glass thermometer can be useful sometimes for double checking things or just leaving in the room. And a couple of syringes that I use for dosing my water treatment. I've got really hard, permanently hard water, so I use either CRS, carbonate reducing solution, or phosphoric acid to reduce the residual alkalinity of the water, depending on what what profile I'm aiming for. I'll use either CRS or phosphoric acid. Use phosphoric acid if I don't want the extra hit of sulfate and chloride that you get from CRS. This is just a bag clip, but again I use it for clamping the pipes on the Grainfather or when I'm doing using the hot rocket. So that's the top layer. Let's put all that back and I'll show you what's in the main box. Okay, so inside, got my trial tube for the hydrometer, a little measuring cylinder that I use for measuring larger amounts of liquid, adjustment liquids or whatever. Got a alkalinity carbonate testing kit. I've read on forums that the residual alkalinity of your water can vary over the year depending on what aquifers the water company is taking your water from. So I have double checked my water several times over the year. It's never varied. I still have that to occasionally do a check. I need to. Spare syringes, you have to buy packs of syringes usually, so I've got spare ones in there. Packets of gelatin. I use gelatin as my standard fermenter fining agent. I find it works really well, really quickly. That's in there. Big magnet. So if you've watched my plate stirrer video, you'll know that I was struggling to keep the spinner, these little spinners that are inside the flask, from pouring out with the yeast. So what you do, what several people told me, is get a strong magnet, put that on the outside of the jar and it just holds your spinner. The main spinner I use isn't in here because I've got the plate stirrer upstairs working on the yeast that I'll be pitching. pH strips, different brand, because I've nearly run out of the others. Slightly different range to the others that I've used. This is just food grade petroleum jelly that I can use on the Kegerator. Yeast nutrient, I put a little pinch of yeast nutrient in my starters, that's in there. That's the keg spanner, for undoing the faucets on the Kegerator. That is in there. This is a set of micro scales. So these are for my water treatments. If you're measuring out 3 grams of something to add to your water, these are from Amazon. They measure down to 0.01 grams. Came with a calibration weight. I'd advise if you do buy them, you buy the set that comes with a calibration weight. So they're so, as you can imagine, they're so sensitive. Whenever you put them down on a different table, you really need to check that they're still calibrated. So you just weigh this and calibrate it. So they've been really handy for being able to weigh out small, very small amounts of water adjustment. And the last thing in here is this. I can get it out of the packet. This post from a Kegerator, that's what it looks like. But it's actually designed to screw on the top of an ordinary plastic sort of lemonade bottle. So they're sold as gadgets for making your own carbonated drinks. So if you're interested in that, you can get one. Again, they're on eBay. And you can make your own carbonated drinks just from fruit juice and stuff. This post here will take both connectors, both the gas line and the beer line. I got it to help me clean my beer lines. So I know the easiest way to clean your lines on your Kegerator is when you're swapping kegs over and you've got some sanitizer in the keg, just pump it through. But if you're not doing that, what I plan to do with this is put some starter or sanitizer in a plastic lemonade bottle, screw this on the top, put my beer line on, squeeze it, and then I can flush the beer lines. So I haven't tried it yet, but when I do, I'll let you know how that works. And that's it. That's what's in my toolbox at the moment. If you've got gadgets and things that you find useful in your brewing, do let me know. I'm always up for new ways of doing things, or things that make your life a little bit easier. My mash is nearly up, so I'm going to pack this up and get on with the mash out. I'll be back with just one or two little wrap-ups and tips. One thing I've done since the last video is buy a little trolley for my Grainfather. It's called a dolly, actually. That's what they call them if you want to try and buy one. I move this around when I'm not using it and store it. This is quite handy to be able to move it. Also, you can move it fairly safely, really, even when it's in flight, so to speak. It's got this little handle at the front, so if I need it near the sink or out of the way, I can just move it on that. So again, Amazon, about £7 or £8 I think that was, and that's quite handy. Got a couple of beers in the fermentation fridge. This one at the top is a bitter. That's ready to go in the keg actually. I'll get that done later today or maybe tomorrow. The bottom fermenter is a really light session ale that I made using some malted oats and experimenting to see if that gives you that mouthfeel. Tastes quite nice, but it's really cloudy like a wheat beer, so whether that'll come clear or not, I don't know, so we'll see how we get on with that. On the stir plate I've got the yeast starter for this brew that we're working on today. It's English ale yeast. This is the 5th time I've pitched it, so you can see I've got a lot of yeast in there. Just turn the stir plate off a minute. So what I'll be doing is I'll leave it on the stir plate to make sure the yeast disperse, and I can pour off the top 500 to store, and then I pitch the rest into the beer. Yeah, the stir plate's still working well. My final tip's a Kegerator tip. I've got these little labels just saying what beer's in each of the 2 kegs. So I'll pick one up. See if I can focus close for you. So what I do is I print off a label using beer labelizer, as always, that I would stick on a bottle, but I slot it into one of these little, I think they're called menu holders. Again, good old eBay provided those for me at a couple of pounds each or something. Print them off, and it's just a nice way to label what's going on in your kegerator. This tap's a single hop Citra, which I call Hokum Citra. It's just a pun on Oakum Citra. I haven't managed to recreate Oakum Citra yet, which is one of my favourite beers, but that's going down pretty well, the Citra beer of mine. And the other one's a Grapefruit Pale Ale, so I use grapefruit zest in the hop rocket and in with the dry hops. I call it Captain Shaddock's Grapefruit Pale Ale. Not much grapefruitiness has come through with some hands. It's not as grapefruity as I thought, but my wife said it reminds her of marmalade, so I'll go with that. I might call it marmalade ale instead. It's a bit strong, 5.75%, but lovely, fruity and tasty. So yeah, that's what I've got on the kegerator at the moment. So that's all for today. Hope you found some of that interesting, and happy brewing.